There are spies, and then there are infiltrators. Operatives so deeply embedded in enemy nations that even their closest friends would swear they were one of their own. Agents who memorize entire identities, who live and breathe an invented life, and who walk the razor's edge between loyalty and death every single day. These are the ghosts of intelligence warfare, the men who become someone else so perfectly that the world forgets who they truly are. Today, we're stepping into a world most governments refuse to acknowledge even exists. The hidden universe of Mossad's master infiltrators. And at the center of the universe stands a name whispered with respect, fear, and awe across the entire Middle East. Eli Cohen, the man who infiltrated the highest levels of the Syrian government and reshaped the outcome of wars without ever firing a weapon. Before we go any deeper, hit that subscribe button, because the story you're about to hear is so unreal, so dangerous, and so shocking that it almost feels like fiction. But every detail is true, and the intelligence community still studies this operation as the gold standard of infiltration. If you want more true spycraft, covert operations, and secret history, subscribing helps us bring you deeper into the shadows. Now let's begin. To understand what made Eli Cohen extraordinary, you must first understand what infiltration truly means. Most people imagine spies as individuals who sneak into facilities, steal documents, then disappear into the night. But infiltration is something else entirely. It is long-term, psychological, high-risk espionage that requires the agent to live under a false identity for months, years, or even decades. Think about that. Waking up every morning and reminding yourself that your real name, your real past, your real family, none of it can exist. Every conversation must be controlled, every gesture calculated, every emotion suppressed, and above all, every mistake, no matter how small, could mean torture and execution. This is the world Mossad specializes in. While other intelligence agencies rely on technology, Mossad has always believed that the most valuable weapon is a human being who can walk into enemy territory and become invisible. Their ultimate objective: find a way into the enemy's core, their political circles, military networks, economic elite, and even their personal lives, and gain access to information no satellite could ever reveal. Israel, a nation surrounded by hostility and conflict since its birth, built Mossad with one overriding purpose: survival. To survive, they needed intelligence, and not just any intelligence. They needed inside information from nations that not only refused diplomatic relations, but openly sought to destroy them. And when traditional intelligence gathering failed, Mossad developed a class of operatives known as infiltrators. Spies who didn't just collect secrets, but became part of the enemy society. And that is where Eli Cohen enters the picture. Born in Egypt, fluent in Arabic, and naturally charismatic, Cohen was the perfect raw material for deep cover espionage. But what made him truly exceptional wasn't just his skill set, it was his psychology. Mossad looks for one quality above all others in an infiltrator: the ability to live a lie so convincingly that it becomes the truth. Cohen possessed this trait with an almost terrifying natural ease. He understood people, their desires, their egos, their weaknesses. He could walk into a room full of powerful men and not only fit in, but dominate. His legend, his fabricated identity, would become one of the most successful cover stories in intelligence history. Under the name Kamal Amin Thabit, Cohen transformed himself into a wealthy, charming, influential businessman from Argentina, returning to Syria to invest in the nation's future. It was a story so well constructed that even today, intelligence analysts call it a masterpiece of operational legend building. Everything was engineered: his background documents, his financial accounts, his connections, even his accent and mannerisms. Mossad operatives spent months training him to think, speak, and behave like a man who grew up in the Syrian Sunni elite. When Cohen finally arrived in Damascus in 1962, he wasn't playing a role. He became Kamal Amin Thabit, and this is where infiltration becomes psychological warfare. Cohen didn't use gadgets or Hollywood spy tricks. His primary weapon was human manipulation. In espionage, one of the most powerful techniques is known as social penetration, gradually embedding oneself into a group by fulfilling their social, emotional, or political needs. Cohen mastered this. He hosted lavish parties that attracted key Syrian officials. He offered support, generosity, and charm. He listened more than he spoke, but when he did speak, it was with a confidence and intelligence that made others seek his approval. Within months, Cohen was influencing military officers, ministers, and high-ranking Ba'ath Party members. The more powerful the individual, the more they trusted him. And the deeper they trusted him, the more they revealed. But infiltration is not simply about collecting secrets. It's about shaping the enemy's decisions. And Cohen did exactly that. One of the most famous examples occurred along the Golan Heights, an area of immense military importance. Syrian officers proudly showed Cohen their defensive positions and troop deployments. But the truly extraordinary moment came when they revealed a plan to build fortifications disguised as civilian structures, adding palm trees for camouflage. Cohen, thinking rapidly, suggested they plant eucalyptus trees instead, claiming they would grow faster and provide better shade for soldiers. They agreed. They implemented the idea. And years later, during the Six-Day War, Israeli forces targeted those eucalyptus trees because Cohen had already mapped every one of them. His influence directly altered the battlefield. That is the power of infiltration. But the deeper Cohen embedded himself, the higher the stakes became. He wasn't just mingling with officials. He was becoming a trusted confidant to individuals who shaped Syria's national defense strategy. Some intelligence historians argue that had he remained undiscovered just a few more years, he might have influenced the entire Syrian government structure. This level of access is unheard of in modern espionage. Even CIA, MI6, and GRU operatives rarely reach such intimate proximity to enemy power. Cohen's method wasn't brute force or deceptive technology. It was pure psychological mastery. And this is where your viewers need to understand the emotional layer behind the mission. Deep cover operatives often struggle with an internal paradox. The identity they adopt begins to feel real. The friendships they form, though based on deception, start to emotionally resonate. The constant pressure of maintaining two lives, the one they project and the one they secretly live, slowly erodes their mental stability. Analysts today say that the psychological cost of long-term infiltration is equivalent to living under permanent threat of execution. Cohen experienced this. He lived alone, isolated, surrounded by individuals who would kill him instantly if they knew the truth. He had to maintain relationships, influence politics, engage in social circles, all while secretly transmitting classified intelligence back to Israel. His radio transmissions were short, timed precisely, and hidden behind layers of operational security. But every transmission carried risk. Every signal meant life or death. The deeper he went, the more valuable he became, and the more dangerous his mission became. Mossad analysts realized that Cohen's intel wasn't just helpful, it was transformative. It provided Israel with insights no agency had ever achieved before. This level of access was so unprecedented that some within Mossad wondered if it was sustainable. But Eli Cohen was a master infiltrator, and perhaps the most gifted one Mossad ever produced. His ability to manipulate enemies by appearing loyal to them was unmatched. Yet, the same access that made him invaluable also placed him under increasing surveillance. Intelligence agencies in Syria began tightening their counterintelligence operations. Foreign radio signals were being monitored, paranoia was rising, and Cohen, operating alone inside a hostile nation, was becoming more and more exposed. Eli Cohen's life inside Syria was a ticking clock disguised as destiny. The deeper he sank into the political bloodstream of Damascus, the more essential he became to Mossad's understanding of Syria's military structure. What most people don't realize is that infiltration at this depth becomes a form of silent warfare, a one-man battlefield where every handshake, every casual conversation, every dinner invitation is an opportunity to extract vital intelligence. And Cohen was operating at a level so high that even intelligence agencies today still marvel at how one man could penetrate so deeply into the core of a country preparing for war. His social circle was no longer mid-level officers or regional politicians. He was now rubbing shoulders with Syria's top brass, generals, intelligence officers, party leaders, and even individuals connected to the presidency. And because he projected wealth, charm, and loyalty to Syria's nationalist cause, the doors kept opening. The more he gave, the more they confided in him. And here lies one of the subtle truths of espionage that intelligence manuals often leave out. People reveal their biggest secrets to those they emotionally trust, not those they fear. Cohen understood this. He worked not as a spy, but as a confidant, and that made him more dangerous than any covert operative carrying hidden cameras or encrypted gadgets. His home became a social hub for Syrian power players, a place where alcohol flowed, secrets slipped out freely, and egos inflated under the warmth of praise. Officers spoke of troop morale, defense budgets, inter-party rivalries, planned offensives, political fractures, and even personal scandals. Cohen kept mental notes on everything. Mossad later confirmed that dozens of critical intelligence reports came not from classified documents or secret photos, but from conversations held at Cohen's own dinner table. Syria in the early 1960s was politically unstable. Coups, counter-coups, and short-lived governments created a kind of political turbulence that Cohen navigated with incredible precision. Every regime change brought new power brokers, but somehow Cohen remained in favor with all of them. This is what separated him from average infiltrators. Most spies lose relevance when the political winds shift. Cohen, however, adapted instantly, always positioning himself as a useful ally for whoever seized control of Damascus. But while Cohen was rising, Syria was tightening its internal security. A series of internal betrayals and failed coups forced Syrian intelligence to hunt for foreign infiltration. They didn't know who or where, but they sensed an invisible hand feeding Israel too much information. And Cohen's radio transmissions, despite being short and encrypted, created a faint electronic signature that began drawing attention. The shadow of danger was growing, but Cohen remained calm. That was his defining trait: emotional discipline under pressure. Mossad later revealed that even when they warned him to slow down, Cohen insisted he was safe. His access was too valuable, his intel too impactful. He believed he could outsmart their surveillance, just as he had outsmarted their political elite. Infiltrators often reach a stage where their confidence becomes their shield and also their weakness, and Cohen was approaching that stage. One of the clearest examples of his growing influence came when Syria invited him, a foreign-born businessman, to tour military installations near the Golan Heights. This was unheard of. No Syrian civilian, let alone someone claiming to be from Argentina, would be granted access to such sensitive areas. Yet Cohen walked through trenches, inspected bunkers, questioned officers about supply chains, troop rotations, and morale. And because he showed genuine interest and provided seemingly valuable civilian perspectives, they treated him like a strategic advisor rather than a guest. This door became a goldmine for Israel. Cohen memorized artillery placements, communication routes, hidden lookouts, and fortification plans. But the most incredible moment happened at a small outpost where soldiers struggled under the sun. Cohen casually mentioned the eucalyptus tree idea again, reinforcing a suggestion he made previously, and years later, during war. Those same trees betrayed the positions of Syrian forces. This wasn't espionage. It was influence. Cohen wasn't just gathering intelligence. He was shaping the battlefield without anyone realizing it. But as his value grew, so did the risks. Mossad began noticing irregularities in Syrian radio monitoring. A new Soviet-trained counterintelligence unit had arrived in Damascus, bringing advanced signal detection equipment with them. Mossad urged Cohen to return home. They believed he had already exceeded every expectation. But Cohen made one of the most debated decisions in espionage history. He returned to Syria one last time. White analysts offer three theories. First, Cohen believed his work was unfinished. Second, he felt personally responsible for feeding Israel the intelligence it needed to survive rising tensions with Syria and Egypt. And third, he underestimated how quickly Syria's counterintelligence capabilities were evolving. Whatever the reason, his return set the stage for the most dangerous chapter of his mission. When he came back to Damascus, Syria was no longer the same. The government was paranoid. Intelligence units were working around the clock to identify leaks. Meetings were monitored. Officials were increasingly guarded in conversations, yet Cohen continued gathering intel. Convinced his legend was still bulletproof, but the country's new Soviet-trained signal detectors were hunting for rogue transmissions. And as Cohen operated his radio from his apartment, sending short bursts of encrypted messages, Syrian intelligence was slowly triangulating the source. Cohen had done everything right, but even the best operative cannot defeat the evolution of enemy technology forever. One early morning, Syrian officers, accompanied by Soviet advisors, surrounded the block where Cohen lived. They shut down the electricity and began scanning each apartment. Cohen was mid-transmission when they stormed through his door. The moment he saw the equipment in their hands, he knew it was over. After years of living as someone else, his real identity would finally collide with the legend he had built. From this point forward, Cohen's mission transformed from infiltration to survival. But even in his final months, his loyalty never wavered. Mossad later revealed that Cohen refused multiple opportunities to save himself by giving up secrets or exposing networks. He chose silence. He chose loyalty. He chose to protect the nation he served, even when Damascus demanded information at any cost. His capture shocked Israel, the most successful infiltrator in its history. A man whose intelligence reports had shaped national security strategies was now in enemy hands. And everything he had built, every relationship he formed, every secret he uncovered, was at risk of exposure. The moment Eli Cohen was taken into custody, Syria believed it had uncovered the key to reversing years of humiliating intelligence failures. But what they didn't realize was that capturing the spy was only the beginning of a much larger psychological war. Cohen had been more than a source of intelligence. He had become embedded in the political DNA of Damascus. Removing him created uncertainty, paranoia, and internal distrust at every level of Syrian leadership. As Syrian intelligence interrogated him, they found themselves confronting a painful truth. The man they had welcomed into their homes, their meetings, even their military installations, had been systematically mapping their vulnerabilities all along. Officers who had shared classified information with him began to panic. Generals wondered what exactly he had witnessed in their war rooms. Politicians who had confided their ambitions and rivalries realized those secrets were now in the hands of their enemy. This was more damaging than any military loss. Cohen's capture wasn't simply the discovery of a spy. It was the revelation of how deeply Syria had failed to detect infiltration. And this embarrassment fueled their rage during the initial interrogations. But the remarkable thing was that despite their pressure, despite the threats, despite the shock of being exposed, Cohen remained strangely calm. His composure wasn't arrogance. It was acceptance. After years of living undercover, balancing lies, friendships, and identities, he knew that any sign of weakness could be exploited. And so he remained disciplined, answering minimally, revealing nothing about Mossad's operations, contacts, or methods. Even when faced with physical and psychological stress, he showed a level of emotional control that modern intelligence agencies still study. Meanwhile, in Israel, news of his capture spread through the intelligence community like a shockwave. Mossad officers, many of whom personally trained and handled Cohen, pushed for rescue options. Covert retrieval, negotiation, even prisoner exchange proposals. But the political reality was harsh. Syria had no intention of releasing the man who had humiliated their government and compromised their military secrets for years. Yet even in captivity, Cohen continued to shape the battlefield. Syrian investigators discovered the depth of his intelligence work, and their reports inadvertently exposed the weaknesses he had identified. They found records of his visit to Golan fortifications, descriptions of artillery placements, the eucalyptus tree suggestion, names of officers who confided in him, and even political plans that had been shared at his dinner parties. Every detail they uncovered only further confirmed how thoroughly he had infiltrated their system. Outside the interrogation rooms, the Syrian government began a sweeping internal purge. Dozens of officers were removed, reassigned, or interrogated. Whole branches of the military and intelligence infrastructure were reorganized. Some officers fled the country, others were quietly executed. Cohen's capture ignited a chain reaction of fear and suspicion that tore through Damascus like wildfire. The leadership no longer knew who to trust. This internal chaos was one of Cohen's final victories, even though he was already behind bars. But perhaps the most personal and heartbreaking chapter unfolded when Cohen was allowed to write letters to his wife, Nadia. Under strict surveillance and censorship, he wrote messages filled with emotional clarity, accepting his fate, expressing regret for the pain it would cause her, and affirming his love and loyalty to his family and his country. These letters, later released by the Israeli government, became symbols of devotion and sacrifice. They revealed the human cost of espionage, the kind of cost that no classified report or intelligence briefing ever truly conveys. Syria, determined to make an example of him, moved quickly toward trial. It was a show trial, designed to humiliate him publicly and reinforce the strength of the Syrian state. Court proceedings were broadcast to assert dominance, to send a message to the world that Syria was not weak. But even as he was presented before the court, observers noted his calm posture, steady gaze, and dignified composure. He did not plead. He did not panic. He did not accuse his captors. He stood as a man who understood that history was watching. Meanwhile, Mossad continued attempts to negotiate through third countries, France, Britain, the Vatican. Diplomats tried to intervene. Appeals for clemency were delivered to the highest levels of Syrian leadership. Even the Pope publicly requested mercy, something almost unheard of in Cold War-era espionage cases. But Syria remained unmoved. The humiliation caused by Cohen's infiltration was too deep, too personal. To them, leniency would signal weakness not just toward Israel, but toward their own population. They wanted to prove that betrayal, real or imagined, carried consequences. As the trial ended and the sentence was handed down, Israel entered a period of national mourning. Cohen was not just a spy. He had become a national hero, a symbol of courage and sacrifice. And yet, despite global pressure, Syria confirmed the date of his execution. What followed was a brief moment that shook the region. Cohen was allowed a final letter to his wife, written with calm acceptance and unbroken loyalty. But what makes this story so powerful isn't just how Cohen lived or how he died. It's how his work continued to affect the Middle East long after his execution. Because the intelligence he provided shaped the outcome of the Six-Day War. His detailed reports on Syrian fortifications, artillery placements, bunkers, ammunition depots, communication lines, and strategic vulnerabilities were used by the Israeli military in planning operations. Even the eucalyptus trees he suggested planting near bunkers became markers for identifying Syrian positions. Think about that for a moment. A spy operating alone behind enemy lines influenced the outcome of one of the most significant conflicts in modern Middle Eastern history. Not through weapons, not through sabotage, but through information, the most powerful weapon of all. And the psychological impact was just as significant. Cohen's infiltration forced every intelligence agency in the region to rethink their security protocols. It changed how Syria vetted officials, restructured its military, and approached internal security. It forced Arab states to question how deeply Israel might have penetrated their institutions, and it set a standard for infiltration that has rarely been matched since. To this day, intelligence agencies still study Cohen's methods. His ability to build trust, to understand human psychology, to manipulate environments without force. These remain gold standards in espionage training programs around the world. But amidst all of this, one haunting question remains. Could Cohen have been saved? Historians still debate this. Some argue Mossad should have insisted he return earlier. Others claim the political climate in Syria made rescue impossible. What is clear is that his capture was not the result of human error, but of shifting technology. His radio transmissions, once undetectable, became traceable as Syria acquired new Soviet equipment. He had pushed the boundaries of espionage as far as any one agent could, and even in the final days of his life, his courage remained unshaken. Witnesses reported that Cohen faced his execution with dignity, refusing blindfolds, holding his head high, fully aware that he was leaving behind a legacy that would outlive the men who condemned him. His death was not the end of his mission. It was the beginning of his legend. Eli Cohen's execution on May 18, 1965, did not silence his story. It amplified it. As the sun rose over Damascus that morning, the Syrian regime believed they were eliminating a threat, closing a chapter, and reclaiming control. Instead, they created a martyr whose influence would echo through the Middle East for generations. The images of Cohen standing tall on the execution platform, refusing a blindfold, became etched into the psyche of an entire nation. He looked less like a condemned prisoner and more like a soldier facing his final mission. His death sent ripples across Israel. Streets fell silent, radios broadcast somber updates, and millions felt the shock of losing a man they didn't even know was serving them. But the most extraordinary aspect of this moment was that despite the tragedy, Cohen had already accomplished what few spies in history ever have. He had completed his mission so thoroughly that even in death, his work continued fighting for his country. Shortly after his execution, Israel began piecing together the final intelligence he had provided. Detailed maps, photographs, coordinates, and reports that described the Syrian military establishment with unprecedented clarity. Generals who reviewed his files described them as a blueprint of Syrian power. It was as if Cohen had opened a window into the enemy's war room. And when the Six-Day War erupted in 1967, the blueprint proved decisive. Israeli forces stormed into the Golan Heights with confidence born from preparation. They knew where bunkers were located, which artillery batteries were operational, which positions were reinforced, and which were vulnerable. The eucalyptus trees Cohen had suggested planting decades earlier now acted like glowing markers visible from the air. His intelligence didn't simply assist the operation, it defined it. In less than 2 days, Israel seized the Golan Heights, a strategic victory that reshaped the geography and politics of the region. Military analysts often describe this operation as one of the cleanest and most efficient territorial captures in modern warfare. What they mention less often, but acknowledge privately, is that this victory was built on the foundation laid by one man working alone, deep inside enemy territory. And that is where Eli Cohen's legacy transforms from the story of a spy into something far more impactful. His mission wasn't just about gathering intelligence. It was about shaping the fate of nations. Intelligence officers study his methods not simply because he infiltrated a hostile government, but because he understood something deeper. Warfare is no longer just fought with weapons. It is fought with information, access, influence, and psychological advantage. Cohen mastered all four. His infiltration demonstrated the true power of building relationships, understanding human behavior, and turning trust into leverage. He showed that the most effective spies are not the ones with the most gadgets or disguises, but the ones who can read people, adapt to environments, and shape narratives from the inside. These lessons continue to form the foundation of Mossad's training programs even today. Yet, this story also carries a profound human message, one about sacrifice. Intelligence officers operate in shadows, without recognition, without glory, and often without the hope of rescue. Cohen's life embodied this reality. For years he lived between two worlds, one where he was a respected businessman in Damascus, and another where he was a devoted husband and father in Israel. The emotional weight of this dual existence is something no training manual can prepare an agent for. The letters he wrote to his wife reveal a man torn between duty and love, between mission and family. In one of his final notes, he wrote that he hoped his children would grow up knowing their father gave everything for his country. These words reflect the kind of bravery that transcends espionage. They reveal the cost behind the stories of covert operations, the lives lived on borrowed time, the families left waiting, and the sacrifices made in silence. And the tragedy does not end with his execution. For nearly 6 decades, Syria has refused to return Cohen's body. Mossad has launched covert efforts, Israel has appealed diplomatically, and even international leaders have intervened. Yet his remains still lie somewhere in Damascus, hidden to prevent a burial that would honor him publicly. This unresolved chapter is one of the most painful aspects of his story, a haunting reminder of the price paid by those who fight in the shadows. But what Syria tried to bury only grew stronger. Eli Cohen's name today is spoken with reverence across the intelligence world. He has become a symbol not just of espionage brilliance, but of resilience, loyalty, and the incredible impact one person can have when they step into the unknown for a cause greater than themselves. Entire documentaries, books, films, and intelligence courses have been created in his memory. Young Mossad recruits are taught his story not as a legend, but as a benchmark, a reminder of what true commitment looks like. The Israeli government continues to honor him publicly, naming streets, schools, and military institutions after him every year. Intelligence officers gather to study his methods, analyze his decisions, and reflect on the delicate balance between ambition and caution. And perhaps what makes Cohen's story even more compelling is that it continues to influence modern espionage strategies. In a world now dominated by cyber warfare, drones, and artificial intelligence, the idea of a lone human operative infiltrating a hostile nation might seem outdated. But Cohen's work proves otherwise. Technology can gather data, but only humans can build trust. Only humans can blend into societies, read intentions, and influence decisions quietly from within. This is why, even in today's world of high-tech surveillance, agencies still rely on human intelligence officers. They study Cohen's approach to relationship building, his discipline in maintaining cover, and his creativity in extracting information naturally from conversations. His techniques, subtle, psychological, conversational, remain timeless. As the story of his infiltration gradually became public, a new generation learned what it meant to operate under deep cover. They understood that espionage is not glamorous. It is patient, lonely, and dangerous. It demands a level of emotional strength that most people will never need to experience. And Eli Cohen carried the burden with a level of humility and courage that continues to inspire. And now, as you've journeyed through the life of one of history's greatest spies, a man who risked everything, infiltrated a government, shaped a war, and left behind a legacy written in both triumph and tragedy, there's one final truth to recognize. Eli Cohen wasn't just a Mossad agent. He was the embodiment of what intelligence work can achieve when bravery meets brilliance. His story reminds us that the most powerful weapons aren't guns, tanks, or missiles. They're decisions. They're secrets. They're the courage to step into danger so others can remain safe. And that is why Eli Cohen will forever be remembered as the ultimate master infiltrator. If you want more deep dive stories of real espionage, elite covert operations, and the hidden world of intelligence agencies, make sure you subscribe right now. Your support helps this channel uncover more of the truth, the stories no one else dares to tell. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next mission.